Welcome to PAR Podcast, episode 76.21. PAR Podcast is an audio supplement for Public Administration Review, the premier professional journal in the field of public administration. This year, 2015, PAR celebrates 75 years of furthering public administration research, theory, and practice. This episode features comments by Derick W. Brinkerhoff, Distinguished Fellow in International Public Management with the Research Triangle Institute International, and an associate faculty member in the Trachtenberg School of Public Policy and Public Administration at George Washington University. Professor Brinkerhoff discusses his article titled Gauging the Effects of Social Accountability on Services, Governance, and Citizen Empowerment, co-authored with Anna Wetterberg, also an associate with the Research Triangle Institute International. This article is currently available on Early View and will be published in Public Administration Review, Issue 76, Volume 2.
This is a comparative public administration paper that focuses on an important governance issue in developing countries. Engaging citizens in holding public officials and service providers accountable, referred to as social accountability, is a popular remedy for public sector performance weaknesses, and it figures prominently in many international donor-funded projects. In our article, we take a critical look at social accountability and consider the contextual factors that affect how and under what conditions social accountability can achieve its intended results. We compare 4 projects in developing countries to shed light on these concerns. We argue that most analyses underemphasize the importance of state institutions and actors, what is called the supply side, in making social accountability work. Also underexamined is the impact of patterns of interaction between citizens and state actors. What does social accountability try to achieve? The literature identifies 3 aims. 1. Increasing the effectiveness of service delivery. 2. Improving the quality of governance and democracy. And 3. Increasing citizen empowerment. The implicit model behind demand-driven social accountability is a principal-agent one. Citizens as principals exert oversight and pressure on public officials, their agents, to hold them to account for meeting their needs and demands. But there are several problems with the model. On the demand side, social accountability requires collective action. How can principals with varied interests and differences in power be mobilized to express demands to state actors? On the supply side, how can state institutions create positive incentives for citizen engagement? In many developing countries, public administration weaknesses discourage both citizens and state actors from participating. In this short podcast, we can't go into the details of the 4 cases. They include public service delivery projects funded by the U.S. Agency for International Development in Indonesia, the Philippines, Guinea, and Rwanda. But let me tell you briefly about how the context for each of the countries developed. For data, we turned to readily available comparative sources, country assessments of civil society by the World Alliance for Citizen Participation, known as Civicus, World Bank comparative decentralization rankings across 182 countries, and Freedom House rankings on political and democratic indicators. The demand and supply side patterns suggest that social accountability mechanisms will more likely find receptivity in Indonesia and the Philippines, where local governments have more resources, autonomy, and they listen to their constituents. These are also countries where civil society is capable and engaged. In both these cases, we might expect social accountability actions to contribute to improving service delivery, governance, and empowerment. Guinea, in contrast, is centralized and has feeble local government. Civil society is weak and unorganized. So social accountability actions are likely to have relatively narrow effects on governance, empowerment, or service delivery. However, we might expect some degree of learning by both citizens and local government actors. Rwanda is an intriguing hybrid case. The country remains centralized and the state restricts political freedoms. But local authorities exhibit both capacity and motivation to improve people's lives. Citizens are actively engaged in service delivery, although their participation is state-directed. So what did we find in comparing experience with social accountability across the 4 cases? All 4 demonstrated some contribution to improved governance. Although we expected improved service delivery to be the most prominent result, this was only the case in the Philippines and Rwanda. Empowerment effects were generally low, except in Guinea, reflecting in part USAID's intent to use services as an avenue to more democratic governance. The cases demonstrate that the resulting outcomes are importantly dependent on context. Among the supply factors, the degree of decentralization stands out. On the demand side, the capacity and motivation of citizens to voice their concerns and participate with state actors in assessing service delivery performance are critical. Decentralization affects the extent to which local officials are willing and able to respond to social accountability processes. Resource and authority mismatches orient officials' attention upward toward higher levels of government rather than downward. However, state support for social accountability may not necessarily translate into opportunities for citizen empowerment, because the state dominates the terms on which citizen input is solicited, casting citizens as service recipients rather than rights holders. Two main implications arise from Anna's and my analysis. The first concerns the degree of alignment between the supply and demand side factors. A closer fit can help to mend decentralization mismatches and reduce institutional incoherence. The second is the time factor. Sustainable social accountability emerges from extended interactions that support both learning and capacity building. We draw 5 conclusions from our study. First is confirmation of the caveats regarding treating social accountability mechanisms as divorced from context. Second, state capacity to engage with citizens and willingness to create space for social accountability is more critical to achieving outcomes than is often recognized. Third, the usual assumption that upward and downward accountability are necessary either-or orientations is overstated. Coherence between the two sources of pressure for accountability can be mutually reinforcing. Fourth, citizen agency and capacity are important. Without the skills and resources for social accountability, citizens are unlikely to be capable or motivated to act. Fifth, repeated interactions, long-term investment in joint action and trial and error, and mutual learning make social accountability effective and sustainable. Our paper ends with several questions for future research. First, what is a realistic trajectory for progress with social accountability? What scale of transformation can we expect from donor-funded project interventions? And finally, what is or can be the role of public sector service values and norms in promoting and sustaining social accountability? I hope we've intrigued you sufficiently to go and read our article. Thank you.
This concludes PAR Podcast, episode 76.21. To listen to additional episodes and learn more about Public Administration Review, please visit us online at publicadministrationreview.org. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at PA Review. Thanks for listening.